I'm Dan. I run the security team at American Airlines. And so it sucks actually following Rich and all the great speakers today because, this isn't going to be a talk about architecture or anything like that. This is really going to be a little bit more about a journey. And we're going to touch on a lot of themes that you've already heard today. So just bear with me. As I mentioned, I'm Dan, CISO at American. Sounds impressive, but I spend most of my time looking at spreadsheets and sitting in meetings all day long. And as I mentioned, we're not talking tool chains or architecture. We're really talking about a philosophy, a change of philosophy that's really in conflict with everything that we've done for like the last 20 years. There's some things that make the airlines unique. For sure, and we'll talk about some of those things that make airlines unique, but there's also, we don't look a lot different than a lot of the other enterprises with some of the people that are up here today or other companies that you'll see at the sessions at RSA. We're an e-commerce, we do cargo, we do a lot of things. So with that in mind, that technology is high risk. As Nicole mentioned this morning, and we saw pictures, and people, it always makes me nervous when I see people putting pictures of airplanes and airports up in their presentations because I'm like, what are they going to talk about? What did Joe do? But in reality, I think that it's because people understand risk and they see that what companies like mine do every day. I mean, we talk about risk and security, and IRS had a bunch of they released that they underestimated their breach, and that's important. And that's I don't want to be caught up in that. I certainly don't want my social stolen by whoever took that information. But on the other hand, we pack a couple hundred people into a metal tube and put them up at 50,000 feet at 500 miles an hour. That's risk. So knowing that, no stress on this job. What we're going to talk about today is the overall security strategy at American and the path that we're taking to balance new methods of deployment with traditional models. And as I mentioned, I talk to a lot of my peers, and I talk to a lot of people outside of the airline space, and you're also going to see I'm not a lot different, right? There's some things that make me unique, but then there's some things that really just, it's like, yep, I struggle with the same things you guys do, and in a lot of ways I look up to what a lot of other companies are able to do. So let's talk a little bit about aircraft, just so you guys get a sense of that world, and you understand how important it is for what we do, because they're very complex. Modern aircraft have a really long half-life, like 12 to 15 years. That's the half-life. These things stay in service between 25 to 30 years. It's not measured in years. It's actually in what they call pressurization cycles. You learn a lot of really interesting, cocktail chatter working in an airline. But it depending on how many times it has to go up to altitude is how long the aircraft can last. And so these things last a long time, and with proper maintenance, there's no reason why they shouldn't. But knowing that, and knowing that we're about to start, putting basically mini data centers inside these planes, or we already have with the 787 and the A350, it really is, it signals a change in how we do things. And you can see that, architecturally, we've added a lot of or I should say, this is IATA with working with like FAA and the airlines and the manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus on. What are the domains when you step on an airplane from an information technology perspective, and what do I need to worry about, right? Where are my touch points within that aircraft control domain, within the flight and embedded control system or the cabin crew system, and does that talk to the airline information services domain with all the administrative stuff, and does that talk to the passenger information and entertainment system, right? And I know the answer, I can't tell you, but yeah, no, they Josh Corman, ladies and gentlemen. All right. But just know that those are things that, it's not like it's not the blind leading the blind, and these things are very carefully constructed because safety is paramount, right? So security is a subset of safety when you think about it at a macro level, and so, at the very least, safety is always a primary concern. People, human being safety, not safety of the aircraft itself, but of the crew and the passengers on the plane. So now we're going to switch gears and talk about a little bit more of how American Airlines is a bit more like a traditional enterprise. And this is just sort of the booking path and your travel experience as you fly on just about any airline. So as you walk through that travel life cycle, there are applications that are purpose-built specific for each part of that customer experience, and there's lots of apps in those arrows too, the glue, right, to get you from one place to the other. And just to name a few, we have e-commerce systems, so we have our .com and our mobile platforms, and we have our reservation systems, which are massive, and some are mainframe based, and some are web service based, and some are in the cloud. We have flyout operation systems, which once again mainframe based, but also some really innovative stuff that we're doing in that area. Maintenance and engineering, once again mainframe based, and I got cloud, right? So when earlier somebody was talking about bimodal, we've been bimodal for a while. This is something that the airlines have been working with for a long time, because I've got systems that were created in 1975, and I've got systems that are being stood up today. So and I have to secure all of it, or I should say my team has to secure all of it. So as I mentioned, they have a long half-life. The onboard IT systems are updated often, and can be replaced. But it really, it's a lot of money to replace an IT system. When something breaks down, it's problematic. So therefore, the design issues that require modifying hardware, they're very problematic. So measure twice, cut once isn't just something we say around the office. It's something that we absolutely, it's a necessity. It's a requirement, right? It's table stakes for us. Because once we commit to putting IT on an aircraft, we have to commit to not having to just pull it out. So that's why some of the conversations today around DevOps, it really fits some of the model, but we got a lot of work to do to be able to do something like that on an aircraft, obviously, because of the cost and because of the risks. So, most of this is done through manual processes that deploy software to the digitally enabled aircraft, as well as the traditional airline, what we call the legacy aircraft, right? So your 737-200s or your 777-200s, et cetera. Those are, they still have floppy disk slots, and darn it if we don't still have floppy disks. But those processes rely heavily on separation of duties, tons of integrity checks, and lots of physical access constraints. And you know what? They actually do work. We've tested it, we've tabletopped, we've done real exercise, and it would have to be like 10 people involved, right, in home office as well as out on the tarmac, in order to do something bad. So, but once again, that's slow. Right? There's lots of checks. We talked about cold gates before and security being in the way. Well, tech ops is also in the way, right? The engineering team. But once again, security is deep, and those processes dictate the flow. So the flow is as fast or as slow as the people are who are doing them. So automation really doesn't exist when it comes to actually touching the aircraft, and because that concept of fail fast, right? 6 updates a day. I don't think you guys want to be, mid-flight and have a push happen, right? So that guy with the unicorn, with the cleaning up the unicorn poop. So we don't want to be in that situation. So obviously we want to rely on those manual methods. The older, the SDLC, as painful as it is, still has a place, right? And so yes, I know I'm standing at the Rugged DevOps and I'm saying that SDLC still has a place. I'm going to duck tomato cans, I'm thinking, not the tomatoes, but in reality it does. So just to give you an example why, not just from the safety perspective, but from a cost perspective, it is incredibly expensive for the airline to make changes to an aircraft. So we have to take care, as I mentioned, measure twice, cut once. So for example, when we want to update something like a certificate revocation, or let's say we want to change, we want to put my picture on the screen, because we want to, we also do have the air sickness bags as well, if I did that. But we'd have to actually pull the aircraft out of service. to do that, or we have to wait for it to do what we call like a C check or a B check, right? And it has to pull it into a maintenance base, and we have to take it completely out of service. So if there was an error in our push, right? If we uploaded software that for some reason caused an issue, our fleet's grounded at that point, right? Aircraft are on the ground and they don't take off until TechOps has touched every single one of those planes. So once again, 6 pushes a day sounds great, except not here. But now I get to talk about happy stuff, right? So let's talk about traditional IT. So infrastructure-focused security model based on the castle and moat method, right? And so you're going to see old memes with me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I like did Reddit. I was on anyway. So and the model can work, right? Castle moat, or M&M or whatever, whatever your analogy is, it can work for traditional systems. When the data resides within the 4 walls of your data center and all of your users are, sit on your internal network, that works great. But as soon as you start adding cloud in, and as soon as you start putting those applications out to the edge for mobile and for enabling your employees to work from home, now all of a sudden the walls of the castle broke down, or well, shoot, the crown jewels used to be in the tower of the castle, but now they're actually in a hut right outside the moat. That's one issue. So now this is what we call, or I call bespoke systems. And anybody know what bespoke means? It's like handcrafted with love. So Etsy, like the things you buy on Etsy are bespoke, right? So that's how we create our IT systems, right? Handcrafted with love, artisanal systems, and we can sell them on Etsy someday maybe. But and that's with with baselines and standards. But as soon as we hand it to that app team, we've now lost control of that configuration, right? Because now they can make changes. Even with AAA, they have to be able to. So virtualization, cloud, we're supposed to fix this problem, but those are just raw platforms. And without the processes and without the culture and without some rigor, you're just going to end up with a data center that's not really any cheaper than what you have probably in your premises. Another issue is smokestacks. So what I call smokestack delivery. So you guys know the golden rule: those with the gold make the rules. And so what I mean by that is the business sets the functional requirements, and because the business is funding and setting the functional requirements, the business gets to create their own little ecosystem. And so then you end up with the stovepipe, and then another app group. The maintenance team wants it done one way, and the e-commerce team wants it done another way. And that becomes a real problem, obviously, when you're trying to manage an entire enterprise. So what we end up with is different methodologies, different programming languages, and I gotta, once again, the team has to work with all of it, right? So we don't take sides, we don't judge, we just have to work within those stovepipes. Islands of capability, and this could also be called islands of knowledge, or however you want to call it, but not all development teams and not all engineering teams are created alike. Not all teams are equally funded, and there's often vital knowledge that's sitting in one stovepipe that is probably desperately needed in another stovepipe, but because they're just in different worlds, the nary and the twain shall meet, and so what you end up with is, once again, islands. And so the next issue is tightly coupled and dependent systems. So once you've created these stovepipes and you have these app chains, the issues that you run into is you've now created brittle systems that are highly dependent on each other, and if you touch one thing, you have no idea what the downstream impacts are. In some cases, we have centralized apps that touch thousands of other systems, thousands of applications, or at least in the high hundreds. And so, you make one change, and all of a sudden, you've got a big problem on your hand. So it turns from, let's push to production to, oh my God, don't touch, right? And so, you talk about 6-week cycles to get to prod, et cetera. That's what happens, and that just slows things down, right? So, and as I'm talking through this, these issues don't make us inherently insecure, right? That these aren't things that prevent an organization from getting to a good place from a security perspective, but they do slow things down. They make it really hard to manage, and they make you have to spend gobs more money on equipment and people to manage that complexity, to manage the stovepipes and the islands. So now let's change and talk about DevOps. So I'm going to leave this up for a while. So So unless you guys took a phone call like 9 hours ago and have been really busy all day, I'm not going to waste your time by pretending I know DevOps more than you. So it's magic. It is, So, but DevOps actually brings its own set of problems to the table, at least for me. So it solves some problems with the automation, right? And I'm a huge fan, right? Automated configuration testing and deployment. It helps the airline get its products and services out to customers and employees much faster. Awesome. However, we still have the long lead times and tons of work in progress, WIP, due to legacy operational processes, tightly coupled systems, and more neck than bottle at times, right? So we have, Joe, and Joe's got 50 things stacked up, and he's got 500 developers screaming at him, right? So DevOps works, but once again, if you're stovepiped, and if you have to leave your stovepipe to go to a different stovepipe, and one stovepipe is DevOps and the other isn't, got a problem, right? So to give you guys a little bit of perspective here, I'm going to share a story that we, cloud and agile can lead to really cool stuff, but you can also, if you don't do it well, it can suck, right? So, we went out to AWS a while ago, and we were all over, right? Security was a champion, and we had, innovative, host-based firewalling that was going to be automatically configured, and we had, encrypted storage, on demand, et cetera, right? It was awesome stuff. But we took our old operational methodologies and our processes and applied them to this new cool technology. And what we ended up with was 6-week lead time, right? So you can spin up a VM in 10 minutes, but unfortunately, it took you about 6 weeks to get to production. But I don't feel so bad about that. And that was a while ago, right? We've gotten better, but, oh, good, okay. Netflix, just a couple of days ago, released a blog post that said that they finally transitioned 100% of their operations to AWS. I don't know if anybody has seen that in this room. It took them 7 years. It took Netflix, 7 years to move completely to AWS out of their legacy infrastructure. So, if it takes them 7 years, obviously there's challenges, right? It's not as easy as pushing a button. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the strategy, and I'm going to have to go really quick now. So unfortunately, this is the meat, and I'm going to go really fast. So the first thing you're going to do is you got to start. You can't break down the stovepipe. So what you have to do is live with them. So one of the things that we did was I stole the BISO model from financial services sector, and I started hiring a bunch of security architects and consultants to actually sit in the IT verticals, right? Assigned to a director or assigned to a VP or whatever the right level was. And that's the only thing that security person did. They're matrix to them, they report to me, but they get to know their systems, and they get to understand their pain points and their pressures to deliver, and they come back to us, and so that way we start that communication. And those people are starting to talk to each other, and so so we're living in the stovepipes, but we're actually starting to drill holes, because now we can actually start seeing the people on the other island and start connecting people, and we've actually seen some good stuff there. So now let's just get to the actual strategy. I'll go pretty quickly, unfortunately, but I hope you guys see the higher level. And this isn't rocket science by any stretch of imagination. This is just boiling security down to its basic elements. This is stuff that DevOps or whatever's after DevOps or SDLC. It doesn't matter what it is. Whatever the threat is, it doesn't matter, because this is universally applied. So it's the road. The road to security is rugged systems, operational excellence, actionable intelligence, and defensible platforms. And I'll go into each one of those very briefly right now. So we'll talk about rugged systems. So rugged systems basically, and I'll take a quick second to say that I wrote these very specifically to use action verbs, emphatic language, and made it personal and we, right? This is about the team. This isn't about, this is almost like a manifesto and not a policy or a strategy. So we will aid the business to develop and maintain rugged systems that can survive in a hostile environment, because the internet is a pretty darn hostile place, if you ask me. And then, resilient, adaptable, and tested. The manifestation of this strategy is an AppSec program, and some companies have them, other companies don't, but you need one if you don't have one. which includes secure coding standards, automated code testing, analysis and reporting, and developer training, outreach, and consulting. And the part outside of the AppSec program you're also going to want to do is build standards, right? Blueprints. We call them blueprints internally, where if a system is, has XYZ functional requirement, we automatically know that it's going to need A, B, and C non-functional requirement from a security perspective, and we give them the roadmap to get that done. So we tell them you have to integrate with our SiteMinder infrastructure, and you have to, and this is the type of account, and you're going to use functionals, and here's the zone that you have to sit in from a firewall perspective, or and we lay it out for them pretty clearly. And that's also, once again, it's all enabling them to go faster, less decision, less toll gating, more, here's the ground rules, go do. So now we'll talk about the next one is operational excellence, and this one just seems kind of obvious and not really specific to security, but at the same time, we all understand how important operations is. So, it's about building reliable services, sustainable environment, and getting to speed to market. So, I wrote this a few years. I had never even heard of DevOps or when I wrote all this, and so I'm reading it now, going, wow, boy, I wish I was a little bit more entrepreneurial. But this one really boils down to process, right? But processes can be centralized or decentralized, and they can be automated or manual. So this isn't about, well, just write a long document, make people follow the document. No, it means you have to have something, right? And I know somebody was up, James was up here like an hour ago saying you don't need process, or somebody said they don't need process. I'm saying you do, right? Because that's how you communicate to everybody very clearly and quickly, unless you want them all lined up outside your office and asking you questions incessantly. Right? So policy and processes is how you communicate to them very quickly. It's boring and important, but it's also some of the hardest stuff to get funded and maintain. So next we go to actionable intelligence. Actionable intelligence is to rapidly convert large sets of data to enable quick thinking, right? Quick decision making. But we need to make sure it's correct, it's meaningful, and it's relevant, right? And so, big data, and our SIEM gets, billion whatever it is a day, or over 1 billion messages a day, or whatever it is. But obviously that's just too much data for somebody to look at. So they, so it's important. Here tooling can help, but also you need a good team of analysts that can go in, look through that data, right, or at least what the SIM or whatever your log management system is, pop into the surface saying, hey, you may want to look at this, and they understand the context, right, and they can pull the architecture document or the security review document, and they can go through it and say, okay, no, this is fine, this is an anomaly, or Nicole mentioned this morning in her talk that sometimes logs lie, right? So, okay. The last one is defensible platforms. And this is basically where we all started, right? So this is hardening, this is survivability, this is effectiveness. Once again, this is where we all started, or at least I started. Some of you guys may have started in AppSec, and I'm jealous. I started as a firewall and network guy. As with Rugged, we wanted to design platforms from the ground up to be secure, right? So this isn't just about AppSec, this is also about PlatSec, right? So it doesn't do you a lot of good if your app is secure, but your underlying database is not, right? Or your operating system is exposed. So it's pretty important that you stay focused here. My recommendation is a solid core of architects to help drive the standards and make sure that things are being done correctly from a design perspective at the right level, right? So it's not just a data flow diagram. I mean, we're talking real architecture. And so here I just have some script. This is the strategy to use the strategy. So this is meta, right? So I have to explain it. It's I know. I haven't apologized yet, but I'm apologizing now. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? So I'm going to go quickly through these, and if you want to reach out to me, I can give you my diatribe on all of these. I have a lot that goes behind them, but basically, what problem are you trying to solve? Use the R.O.A.D when discussing products with vendors, right? Ask them the question, which part of my strategy are you solving? And if the answer is none, bye, right? And bonus points if you can solve more than one. I stopped saying best practice and now I just say common practice. That's actually a big one, right? Because you say best practice to the finance team and they're like, ooh, we're not writing that check. But you say common practice, you make it sound like every company is doing this, you get a little bit more traction. Tooling enables a process enables culture, and culture enables further investment in tooling. And so this really becomes a cycle, at least the way I see it. And so, it probably starts with tooling because you can't, you can start with culture, but if you don't have the tools, it's not going to go anywhere. And if you have good processes, but they're manual and it still takes 3 weeks to get to production, okay. But tooling is what really gets things started. But if you don't get the process and you don't get the culture moving, it's, once again, it's going to be like Amazon, right? It's going to still take 6 weeks to get to prod. Push for automation, but understand that many see it as a threat, right? Because if you're automating something that somebody does, they're going to be resistant to that, right? People don't like change, whether it's change, even if you walk in the door and say, you're not going anywhere, we need all the people we can get, we're super busy. They don't want change, right? They've been doing this for 10 years, they don't want to change. Build programs, not just controls, right? Don't just buy the tool, build a program around it, right? I don't have an AppSec tool, I have an AppSec program. It may have some tooling in it, but it's got a lot more than that. Build partnerships, understand your customer. Make sure, be transparent, open, and empathetic, right? And those are the two. You got to have both together, right? Let them know I'm a service provider just like they are. I have to deploy applications into production just as fast as they do. And I have the same pressure if I don't deliver. And I have the pressure of, if I don't deliver, then bad things could happen too, right? So let them know that you walk in their shoes just as much as they walk in yours, right? Embrace DevOps, but make sure that you don't forget that legacy needs a squeeze every now and then, right? And this is probably the most important one. You need some accountability into your culture and your processes, right? And accountability doesn't mean they come in and the hammer comes down and people get fired. It's just, transparency. It's saying, calling people out, right? Putting them up there saying, hey, why didn't you follow the process? Right? It doesn't have to be public shaming, it could be private shaming, but accountability, right? Hold people accountable. Do what you say. Thank you.